What's up, guys? PF Jung here, answering your questions for GQ Magazine. Let's jump right in. Question 1. Why are you such a Will you speak about God more? I'm curious as to your framing of the divine and maybe a bit more of your own personal journey if you want. Do I believe in God? Yeah, probably. I think my main intuition for believing in God is that reality is irrational. The fact that existence is not logical. There's no rational explanation for why there is something rather than nothing. So the idea that the ultimate reality therefore would abide by the laws of logic or, empirical evidence, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I do believe there's a God. I think Christianity captures it pretty well, but I think so do other religions. I think they're all approximations. And I do think that there are sort of moral laws to the universe that you have to follow. I think karma is a real thing, quote unquote. And I try my best to abide by those morals. I mean, I grew up Christian. I went to church, youth camp, all that stuff. And I was hardcore believer, prayed out loud every night until I was probably in 6th or 7th grade. And then I stopped believing, had my cringe atheist phase. And now I'm, much more appreciative of it psychologically. And Jordan Peterson said he thinks that Jesus literally did rise from the dead. So, I don't know. It's hard to say. Yeah, why have you stopped streaming? I did think it was strange. Was this announced somewhere and I missed it? Yeah, streaming, when I stream, it feels like I'm a performing monkey, it's a show and I have to play a character and I already have a problem kind of being irony poisoned and leaning too much into the cocky type, everyone's wrong except me attitude, which is true. But I do think, spending all your time rationalizing or answering questions and stuff, it's like, I need to learn some humility and try and only speak on what I am confident enough to speak on. I have no problem stating what I believe, but I'm not trying to convince people of that. I'm just focused on saying what I believe to be true. I did like having the call-ins because it was an opportunity to talk to people. And it is I did enjoy meeting some of the people that, meeting, quote unquote, some of the people that watch my videos, because it's like, okay, these people it reinforced my belief that I am communicating to at least some people who are competent and have a lot of potential in their lives to make a difference. So, the ideas that I'm putting forward can percolate through different people and all that. That's cool. I may start streaming again and do League of Legends teamfight tactics or something. I've been talking about that for a while, but doing something casual with video games might be cool. But I don't know if I'm going to do open call-ins, and we'll see. I don't know. Question: if you could force a debate between any two individuals on the planet, who would they be, and what would the debate topic be? This is an excellent question. I would pick Jordan Peterson and Gabor Mate, and I'd have them talk about either Israel or Palestine, which I think would be good, because Gabor Mate has a very reasonable perspective on the issue. And Jordan Peterson doesn't seem to acknowledge any of the valid arguments from the anti-Zionist side, let's say. But actually, it'd be cooler to have them talk about maybe meaning and happiness, because Jordan Peterson is very much don't pursue happiness, it's a waste of time. Adopt responsibility and make something of yourself. And Gabor Mate is more on the hippie side of you deserve love for who you are. And it'd be just interesting to see those dynamics in practice. Gabor Mate was talking shit about Jordan Peterson a while ago, saying he was very angry. Did I just spit on the fucking camera? And at the time, I was like, this guy's just a hater. He's a Marxist hater. But it turns out that was probably 100% true. What type of fiction do you partake of? I'd love to hear about your favorite stories or give recommendations. Well, Star Wars is probably the OG fictional universe I immersed myself in. The movies and video games are the best. Warhammer 40K is what I'm into right now. The original Warhammer universe, not 40K, but Warhammer Fantasy, those are the books that I've read the most. I think that's a great universe. I thought it'd be so cool if they did a Game of Thrones style show, but in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. Best movies are probably, Zootopia is number one. I mean that entirely unironically. Interstellar's up there. Shutter Island might be one of the best too. And then Lord of the Rings and all those are just classics. I'm very normie when it comes to my, fiction tastes. Maybe not normie, but fiction and music, I guess. I don't have very esoteric views, I don't think. If you just love reading fiction, I would recommend The Ambassador Chronicles, Warhammer Fantasy, The Ambassador Chronicles. Have you read The Way of Kings, full of archetypal meme potential? Brandon Sanderson does a good job. Keep it up. Kudos from Louisiana. Well, thank you, Louisiana. I read the first third of The Way of Kings, and then they got to the bridge cliff jumping scene that they were moving ladders for 3 chapters, and it was just, I got bored. Now that's my fault because I just don't finish shows in general. I watched Brandon Sanderson's entire lecture series on creative writing. It's phenomenal. It gets you in the mood to write. I do have some writing for a fictional grand fantasy series, I guess. And really, honestly, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now with like the YouTube stuff or my full-time job or whatever, I honestly, the coolest thing would be writing fiction, maybe, I think. A while ago, you mentioned that you believed Rogue One was one of the best Star Wars movies. Do I still hold that opinion? And if so, curious to why you thought Rogue One was better than the original. Bonus if I rank all the movies. Well, here's what I'll say. My hot take with Star Wars is there are no good Star Wars movies except for Rogue One. I watched them when I was younger, so I liked them, and that was great. But if you actually look at the movies themselves, they're all bad, okay? Ewoks killing the Vader's Elite Legion. I believe it's the 501st on Endor. You know, it's too immersion breaking. It's too unrealistic. I can't have these furry bears killing elite stormtroopers. And maybe they're not all bad, but they're at best average. Revenge of the Sith is pretty good. And the whole world building is obviously arguably the best of all time. Star Wars is the best universe. Rogue One is phenomenal because it's morally gray and they all die in the end. Spoiler. All of the best Star Wars content in terms of the universe building comes from the video games, right? It's almost all from Knights of the Old Republic, which is arguably the best game of all time. Certainly the best RPG. I'm not a huge Skyrim fan. I liked Oblivion, but KOTOR is just better. And then Battlefront 2 and a lot of the other games, they just add so much, and it's so much, I don't know, more concrete, I would say, in its storytelling capabilities. I don't know. How can we drive the remaining Destiny posters from this channel? Oh, that would be great. I mean, look, Destiny, I've said this before, Destiny is like the default influencer for intelligent people who care about politics sort of in the online space. So obviously there's going to be crossover between anything I talk about and people that watch him regularly. I am one of his regular viewers, arguably. And if one of the services I can provide the world is by, you know, injecting old school Jordan Peterson maps of meaning stuff into, you know, a bunch of Destiny viewers, then more power to me, I'd say. So welcome to those basement-dwelling dweebs. Okay, most upvoted comment. Question, who's your go-to in Mario Kart? Obviously, well, Baby Mario, but that's kind of a cheat. Although here's what's interesting. I'm going to do a video on why truth is like the ultimate heuristic, and I'm going to use the chain chomp ability that the Baby Mario and Baby Luigi characters have, where basically the chain chomp thing automatically keeps you in the center of the track, and it's the ultimate heuristic. Instead of trying to navigate it manually, you just follow the chain chomp, right? And that's sort of like truth. Instead of trying to like figure out whether or not, you know, you should say true things or suppress true things, you just go with truth and then trust that that puts you on the center of the course. So, but yeah, Baby Mario, obviously. What is your education? How much have you learned formally versus how much have you watched lectures, read, and used the internet? What are the benefits to both? I majored in supply chain management from the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, and I minored in gender studies. How much have I learned formally? Not much, really. Well, how much have I learned formally in terms of politics and philosophy and stuff? None, basically, at all, formally. Almost all of my knowledge comes from, you know, watching lectures and interviews and podcasts and stuff, and some books. I do regret not taking more like philosophy courses in college, especially regret not developing relationships with professors to have conversations. I actually had multiple like 3-hour conversations with one of my gender studies professors who was great, and you know, to this day that's informed my perspective, and I am much more sympathetic to, let's say, the left broadly, because I was able to talk to someone like a gender studies professor is your archetypal leftist, right? But he was very reasonable and said, you know, of course, people in the academy are so vain and anti-capitalist despite the fact that, you know, they're incredibly privileged. So that has stuck in my head as not generalizing as much as I might otherwise. And then as far as, you know, for my actual education, did I learn stuff in supply chain management that I apply to my work? Microsoft Excel is probably the single most valuable thing I learned in college, and some general business concepts that have been useful since, so I would say so. Where did you start with Jung? I read Undiscovered Self and started on Memory Streams Reflections, but want to know where to jump off from here. Which pieces were most foundational? I do kind of feel somewhat bad because my YouTube channel is called PF Jung, which implies that I, you know more Jung than I might otherwise. And I have read multiple books by him, but I don't claim to be anything even approaching an expert. Memory Streams Reflections is okay. I would say the best book is Man and His Symbols. I've read that twice now. That gives a good overview of a lot of the core ideas. And then beyond that, I would say Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious is probably the more concrete details. There's a lot of lines that stick out to me from that book, so I would recommend those two. How do I actually improve as a person? I've heard plenty of people giving good advice in self-improvement, and yet I rarely absorb their teachings and I fall back in the same old routines. Well, this one's hard because that's sort of like the ultimate question in life. How do I improve as a person? What's worked for me, a specific thing I would say is use your vice as a reward. So if you play a lot of video games, you smoke a lot of weed, don't just quit those cold turkey. Don't stop doing those per se, but do something productive like go to the gym or whatever thing by your own definition is productive. Do those and then reward yourself by playing video games and smoking weed or whatever. That was a big thing for me in college because I would just like, when I was super depressed, like my freshman year, I would just wake up and play video games or whatever. And it just felt crushing and destroying. But I noticed if I went and studied for tests like all morning and then took the test and then came back, I felt great playing video games. Like it was a reward after having done something productive. And the same is true, like if I go to the gym in the morning and I come back and I play a couple rounds of TFT, that's so much better than just like, well, I've got nothing else to do in between, now and 4 hours from now, so I'll just play some video games. So yeah, use your vice as a reward is the most specific piece of advice I would give. A weird thing that keeps popping into my head is when I'm talking to friends on the left and the right, that whenever I have an opinion on something that I'm conflicted on due to the lack of information or vibes, they tell me things like, you're aligning yourself with people you don't want to align with. What's the most enlightened way to respond to this without coming off as butthurt or trollish? Well, I don't know. Look, I'm against wealth inequality, so does that make me like Joseph Stalin? I mean, you can just, it's the classic, Hitler loved dogs and Hitler was a vegetarian argument. Agreeing with people on something is not aligning yourself with people. I would say, and this is something I do consciously, is anytime you put forward an idea that is generally perceived as being right-wing or left-wing, it helps to also articulate explicitly all of the reasons why you are not right-wing or left-wing alongside that. Like if I'm going to criticize Israel, which is a very, I guess, left-wing, but because I'm a white male, I'm right-wing coded when I say that. I try to be very clear and I say, yes, I think Israel's influence over the United States is a problem. And arguably there's nothing that gets in the way of addressing that more so than a bunch of anti-Semitic little dweebs like, the Graper King, who are just, genuinely racist by that definition and are a complete waste of time. So, but people will accuse you of being whatever, and, that's just life. How do you assess the memetic disadvantage the center has due to the fact that nuance almost definitionally softens the group identity? Yes, look, my goal is to make enlightened and radical centrism great again. It's a difficult task because, first off, you shouldn't get attached to a label. So I would say the center as a label has a memetic disadvantage, but a charismatic individual has memetic significance independent of what label they go by. So what you need is a large number of leaders, thought leaders, influencers, memetic feudal lords who get together, and it doesn't matter if they call themselves centrist or whatever, but there needs to be a coalition of people in the center who have enough, charisma and influence and likability and all that stuff. And then that creates the memetic advantage. And then arguably the fact that, again, in my opinion, the truth sort of is like a dialectical function of being a synthesis of left-wing perspectives and right-wing perspectives. You kind of naturally have an advantage by aligning yourself with the truth in that regard. But again, people disagree, but it's all definitions. How does one balance focus on his own individual memetics with that of family, locality, state, and federal level memes? There are always many memes flowing through us. How do we know which ones to focus on? I don't even know what that means, but it's a great question because it sounds like something that I would understand, but I don't. I think this means, how do we care about what's important? Look, it's hard to say. This is my biggest problem is I probably over-index how much time I spend on caring about, federal or international politics when there are all kinds of practical things in my personal life that I neglect, at a cost to me. Because I'm trying to do this sort of as I don't want to say career, but I certainly long-term want to be involved in this. It gives me a justification. But I would say, always start local. Focus on the memes that are important to you in terms of your hobbies, your interests, your career, what you want to be doing 5 to 10 years from now. Become enthralled in that memetic space, I guess. That's kind of general, but that's what I would say to that. How does your system evaluate extreme, redundant, and deconstructed levels of irony, like meta and post-ironic memes? This is referring to the Archetypal Memetics framework that I am actively developing. I would say it doesn't address meta and post-ironic memes because those sort of by definition move outside the framework. They're self-referential. It's sort of a hyper-reality phenomenon. I think you can interpret the meaning of meta and post-ironic memes to some degree, and then that meaning can be related back to sort of the archetypal memes framework. But that's the problem with irony, is you get so detached from, you know, the underlying emotional reality that it becomes irony poisoning, if you will. What Warhammer armies do you play, and are there any that you would like to play that you don't have? I have every army in Warhammer because I play Warhammer Tabletop Simulator. My main army, though, is Space Wolves, so, you know, I get that's a meme. My video editor is a Warhammer pretentious scum, and apparently the Space Wolves are like a meme faction, but I don't care. I like Space Marines because there's a nice variety to the army. There's a lot of units. I was playing Grey Knights, but they're too difficult to move around with all their jumping up and down abilities. And there's not that many units to choose from. So I've always been an off-meta player. Like when it came to League, I always played, you know, champions that were not the norm. So I like running kind of an infantry-heavy based Space Wolves list with no Thunderwolf cavalry, just a bunch of Wolf Guard with librarians and plasma pistols. And it doesn't really work that often, but the person I play with the most plays Adeptus Sororitas, and they just got nerfed heavily, so it's all good. Completely unrelated. What would be the position of an enlightened centrist on slavery if he lived in the U.S.? Have you seen Game of Thrones, where they free the slaves, and Tyrion is like, let's give it 7 years? You know, I think that's probably the enlightened centrist position. I mean, well, obviously there should be no slavery. That would be the first step. But if it was like, given that it's happening and we need to get rid of it, what's the best way to do it? I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough historically. You know, England did it without a civil war. I think they purchased slaves or something like that. So that seems to make sense. But maybe the right thing was to just go down south and shoot the first fucking white guy I see. I don't know. What is the correct centrist view on economic policies? Should we stay in the neoliberal status quo or progress into a freer market or change the entire system like socialists want? I don't know. Look, generally you need free markets. You need fair markets, which means there is a referee stopping collusion and fraud, and you just generally need free markets. Now, I'll say with AI and all of this and the increasing amount of wealth inequality in the world and the techno-feudal nature of our economies, yeah, I think we can afford to reduce innovation, quote unquote, by increasing taxes and funding more social services. I think that's certainly possible now. But I don't know. It's a general question, hard to answer. Do you think centrism should include centering between populism versus establishment, or is it fine to be extreme anti-establishment while being centered between progressive and conservative? No, centrism should be centered between populism and the establishment. First off, anyone who's anti-establishment just all the time by definition is an idiot. They're an anarchist, and nobody thinks anarchists are a bigger joke than I do. Being populist and being anti-establishment means being the current ruling establishment class. Obviously, you need a establishment, you need institutions. The argument is just the current people in them and the lineage of people, the permanent state that has been there for a while, is corrupt, and they should be replaced with other people. And really, that's all that means, in my opinion. And I think that, that you can be very centrist and be anti-current establishment so long as you want to replace them with someone more competent. Doesn't enlightened centrism lead to logical fallacies? There's nothing that is intrinsic to truth that suggests it must lie somewhere in the middle, whether it be subjective, objective, or transjective. I guess it's just it's an axiom of faith that I put forward, although it's not really faith, because I would say it's backed up by empiricism, and certainly in my experience, and there are many thinkers who would say the same. I guess one of my fundamental beliefs is sort of the reality of order and chaos, and meaning lies in the border in between, which is sort of similar to Hegelian dialectics. And, you know, Aristotle, I think it was Aristotle, would talk about the golden mean between virtue lies between two different vices, like confidence lies between arrogance and self-doubt. So I would say it's intrinsic to truth that the correct answer is a synthesis of differing perspectives, but I guess it gets complicated. Which political faction do you think has better in-group cohesion enforcement apparatus, left or right? When you talk to Destiny, he seemed to think it was the obvious to right was better at forcing their members into lockstep, but I don't know if that's true. Yeah, I don't know if either side has a better enforcement apparatus than the other. Trump is a more unifying figure solely through his cult of personality. So right now, the right is more unified in that regard. But post-Trump, no, I don't think there's anything intrinsic about the right or intrinsic about the left that makes them better at keeping their different coalitions in line. There's going to be plenty of infighting on the right and plenty of infighting on the left. Also, that's true in part because on the right, you have people who are on the left and on the right within the right. Like you have hardcore right people and center right people, and center right people are left compared to the hardcore right people. So even in that regard, left and right, I don't think ultimately determines, the in-group enforcement mechanisms. All right, last up, let's do lightning round. What do I think about the Bears beating the Packers for the first time since 2018? Well, now we have a worse draft pick. So this is the problem with football. Once you're out of the playoffs, it's like, I'm rooting for the team to lose because that's just the best thing long term. But it sucks. I mean, I guess it's good we won, but the situation sucks. Question, if you had to be a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Marijuana. Have you considered speaking to Meme Analysis? He's got some pretty interesting videos. Yes, I think I sent him a message a while ago. He has not responded due to my lack of clout, which is fair. But I'd be happy to talk to him. I've cited him in a bunch of my videos, and he is sharp. I live in Fort Worth. Any way I can help you since you live in Dallas? I mean, not directly, but, become a competent person who has something to offer long-term, and then go use the lessons that I impart upon you, in whatever way makes sense. Question, what do you think about Georgism and the land tax? I don't think about it. I don't know what that is. And if by land tax you mean real estate taxes, I think that's fine. It's one way to do taxes. How often can we expect Enlightened Centrism versus Dark Centrist? I don't know. JJ and I we text regularly, and, we'll do it maybe once every couple of weeks or something like that. After the 20th time talking to JJ, I think we both know kind of where our perspectives are, so it's not necessarily learning much. We're doing it mainly for other people, I guess, but we'll still do them on a regular basis. How is Rowan/JReg to work with in regards to the second Political Compass rap? Well, JReg I never worked with directly. Rowan just used that footage from him. And Rowan's great. Even though Rowan is a cringe Destiny cult member, he's a very nice guy and very sharp, although he's a little bit too left-wing for my regards. But I think it's a function of temperament because, there are just different intuitions that people have, and that's fine. All right, thank you for all your questions. If you have more questions, comment them in the video, upvote the ones that are interesting, and the next time I do another QA for GQ Magazine, I'll answer them. Otherwise, good luck and Godspeed.